he seems to be reluctant on the front end of this, as we've talked about, and we're going to maybe catch a little more of that today, depending on what you do with it. But he seems to be, whether it's rooted in his genuine humility or fear or whatever, but we talked about how it's possible that his reluctance is just the way you tell a story about a prophet, God's man, God's woman, saying, not so fast, maybe I'm not cut out for this job, which puts all the responsibility on God for making the activity that this person is going to do happen. So his responsibilities here as a brand new king are about to kick into high gear, and that's what chapter 11 deals with. So here we go. Nahash the Ammonite went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. And all the men of Jabesh said to him, make a treaty with us, and we will be subject to you. But Nahash the Ammonite replied, okay, I will make a treaty with you only on the condition that I gouge out the right eye of every one of you, and so bring disgrace on all Israel. What a deal. Who are the Ammonites? I tried to summarize it in a picture for you. This is why we love AI, because you say, I need a mashup of a shepherd and a pirate, and this is what it generates for me. It's perfect. Yeah. The best dictionary piece I read, I liked the phrase, so I stole it from them, and I didn't put it in quotes, so I didn't properly cite things. Don't tell my students. And you guys in the back row, I'll pay you later, so you don't say anything, and we'll be, what, $5? Do I need more than that? I don't know. Whatever. The Ammonites are descended from Ben-Ami, son of my father. Basically, they're a people group. They're people. That's kind of what their name generally means. And you remember that he is a son of Lot. You remember where Lot gets his kids?
Yep, from his daughters.
Yeah, that's not the most romantic way to have children, but, and again, it's one of those, there's a couple of things that the narrative does by letting us know that, if you remember the story, after Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot and his daughters and wife leaves. His son-in-laws won't go. So his wife looks back, he's turned into a pillar of salt. So you got Lot and his two daughters and no heirs. And they want heirs. The name of the game in the ancient world is to have descendants. And so what we would say, very, very healthy, normal, appropriate sexual boundaries kind of go out the window, because the idea of having an heir is top of the line. And we see lots of violations of this, of what we would say sexual norms, because those take a back seat to actually producing a descendant. This is Judah and Tamar. Tamar seduces her father-in-law Judah, when he will not arrange a marriage and an heir for her, because he's already lost 2 kids, doesn't want to lose a third, and won't deliver his third son for marriage. So Tamar just seduces him. And Lot's daughter is no different. They're in the middle of nowhere. The city they have lived for who knows how long has been destroyed. There are no marriage prospects anywhere. So they get this idea, let's just get dad plastered out of his mind, and then we'll seduce him. And if your family members get you drunk, you probably don't have a lot of boundaries anyway. So Lot ends up fathering a couple of children. And one of the things that the Hebrews like to do is tell stories about the origins of some of their opponents, right? And we look at Moab and we look at Ben-Ami. Yeah, they're not Jewish, and look where they come from. Yeah, they don't really quite have the appropriate lineage, right? And this is the Canaanites. This is Ham, who walks in on his father Noah. When Noah, again, another guy who gets plastered out of his mind, uncovers himself in the tent, and his son pokes his head in and goes and tells his brothers, just kind of disgraces his father. And it's the origins of the story of Canaan, because the Hebrews want to wink and say, yeah, look, their background is not so good, it's not so hot. We are the true people, and we've got the lineage to prove it. And then we get over to Matthew, the 1st chapter, where God likes to include all the stuff that's inappropriate. All of a sudden, the guy that we worship, Jesus of Nazareth, he's got Tamar and Judah in his ancestral line. So Jesus has incest in his genetics. and he has adultery. He has a prostitute, Rahab, at Jericho. He's got adultery. The Hebrew way of telling their own story is to just kind of look lowbrow at the people who don't have quite have the pedigree. And God leans into that and says, it's not the pedigree I care about at all. My plan doesn't need pedigree. And the person of Jesus reveals that more than anything else. So what we get is kind of a cousin, a distant cousin people group of the Hebrews. And one dictionary described it as these guys are predatory nomads. So you're opportunists, right? Most people who commit crimes don't go around, I'm going to rob a bank today. They happen to be walking out of Walmart and they see the unguarded cash at the Girl Scout table and they're going to grab that thing. That's what a predatory nomad is. They have the character to exploit whatever opportunity they have, and once in a while they're going to see something that looks like an easy target, like the city of Jabesh Gilead, and they're going to go after it. So, because the Ammonites were Lot's descendants, Lot is the nephew of Abraham, he's still pretty high up there. Like anybody connected to Abraham kind of gets the blowback and some of the leftovers of God's blessing. So God is going to give Ammonites specific land on the far side of the Jordan toward the south, and the Hebrews were not allowed to inherit that area. So that wasn't theirs. It belonged to the Ammonites. But again, a lot of ranch land for their flocks. But every once in a while, they're going to show up and just cause trouble for the Hebrews. And in the time of Jephthah, way back in the middle of the book of Judges, around chapter 10 and 11, it's going to be the Ammonites who create all the problems that Jephthah has to solve. So yeah, kind of a pirate shepherd. I don't know. I thought about redoing it to where like the shepherd's staff was actually the hook on his hand. I thought that would have been good. That just seems like you've heard the old preacher's joke, right? The one about the guy who walks into a bar and he sees a pirate with a wooden leg, and he sees a hook and he's got one eye, and he says, "Wow, you've really been injured over time." He says, "How did that happen?" And he says, "Well, the pirate says I was out on the high seas, and the British came up and they boarded, and we had a big fight, and one of them cut off my leg, and I later escaped prison and went back to pirating." And says, "Well, what about your hand? What about the hook?" And he said, "Well, there was another pirate ship, and we had some treasure, and we boarded them, and we were fighting, and we won the day and stole the treasure, but it cut off my hand." And he said, "Oh, okay, well, that's good. Well, what about your eye? How'd you lose that?" And he said, "It was my first day, a bird pooped in my eye, and it was my first day with a hook." Spiritually, I'm not sure what that did for you, but there it is. Whoops. Let's go back here. All right. So we get to this tiny little non-metropolis called Jabesh Gilead. This is located in the Transjordan. So the Hebrews went Cisjordan, Transjordan, trans being other, on the other side of the Jordan from where Israel was. And the exact location is pretty uncertain. This is not a big metropolis in any sense, but it tends to be pretty isolated. And for a small people group, again, nomadic predators, you want to target a city that's very, very isolated. We'll see this later when David is on the run from Saul, and he needs to attack cities. He's living among the Philistines, and he wants to demonstrate that he's loyal to the Philistines. So he'll go find a little outpost, and he'll just destroy everybody. And it makes it look like, he's fighting on their side and all sorts of stuff. But David tends to target these little cities where he doesn't have to leave survivors and no witnesses and all sorts of stuff like that. So the first mention of Jabesh Gilead, interestingly, is in Judges 21. Anybody remember what happens in Judges 21? We're going to be spending some time there this morning, so it's good to dust off your whatever synapses up there. And if you don't remember anything, then I can get after Dr. Eubanks about that, because he did the whole Judges thing, and come on, you already forgot what was in the end of the book of Judges? Yeah, I know, because we've been doing this for so long. Yeah, lost most of your gray matter. If you remember the story in Judges 19, that's the story of the assault and murder of the Levite's concubine. And that one episode, the priest, remember, cuts up his wife, sends the pieces throughout Israel, gets everybody so angry that they show up ready for war. He uses his wife's body to actually start a civil war. Very effective way to do that in a conservative culture. They're just shocked beyond belief. They're ready to punish anyone and everyone. At the end of the book, you remember that they basically wipe out the tribe of Benjamin. There's only 600 left, and they need wives for Benjamin. And so they start flipping through their notes about the battle, and they say, well, did anybody not come to the battle? And they really didn't care who came to the battle. They didn't need anybody in the battle. But they had threatened anyone who doesn't show up, and one city didn't show up, the city of Jabesh Gilead. And remember that because you have 600 young men and the rest of the tribe presumably is destroyed, they've got 600 men who have no brides at all, which means there's no family, which means there's no descendants, which means your tribe is dead. Israel's horribly grieving this, and they said, we got to come up with a solution. Well, we need wives for all of these men. We got a problem, though, is what Benjamin did in supporting the city of Gibeah when Gibeah assaulted this woman and the Hebrews decided to attack it. That city was so wicked, and Benjamin defended it, that the rest of the tribe said, we will not give any of our daughters to the tribe of Benjamin. We're not ever going to do it. And then, they have buyer's regret on their vow, stupid vow, just like Jephthah. And so now they're facing a tribe that is going to go extinct. You can't marry outside being Jewish. There are no women in the tribe of Benjamin left. And we're not going to allow you to marry because we promised God to let you die. So, you always want to keep your vow to God that way. So they're stuck. So what do? They say, well, where can we get women? So they realize that the city of Jabesh Gilead has got lots of people in it. Lots of unmarried young girls. Well, that's very convenient because they didn't come to the battle. So what the Hebrews do in Judges 21 is they go slaughter every single person in the city. Men, women, even children, except young girls who've never been married. And that's how they provide wives for Benjamin. This is not punishment by the Hebrews to say we're going to go, attack Jabesh Gilead because they disobeyed, they didn't support the war. No, they were using that as pretext to engage in human trafficking. That's what they were after. And that's the case because they're going to do the exact same thing. Later, they do the math. We've got 600 guys, but there's only 400 girls in this city. What do we do now? Well, we got a problem. Oh, we know. We will distort the law that says if a guy assaults a woman that she's not engaged, so an unattached woman who gets sexually assaulted, who gets raped, well, the guy has to marry her and can't ever divorce her. And so what they do is they actually go to Shiloh and they just grab a bunch of teen girls who are volunteering for a youth convention. In other words, they're ministering, and they might spend their summer ministering. And these other 200 guys go down, lie in wait, and they abduct these women as well. And I think that law in Deuteronomy that is designed to reintegrate a sexual assailant and provide for the victim, not a great solution for anybody, but it's the best that they had in a patriarchal system. It's designed to even rehabilitate somebody who's sexually violent. Well, that's a cool law, but I think what they do is they distort that a little bit and say, well, if they assault them, the fathers really aren't giving them away in marriage, so they just kind of have to put up with it, and this is what we're going to do, so they abduct all of these women. This is the chaos at the end of the book of Judges. Starting off with that distortion of God's heart, his word, is going to be the slaughter of the city of Jabesh Gilead. There is no moral conviction, you guys didn't show up for battle. This is all about just figuring out how to get wives for this tribe that has been decimated. So what's cool about this city, though, is this is going to bracket Saul's reign. The first act that Saul does is to deliver this city in battle, which is what we're looking at this morning. So a few years from now, when we get to toward the end of the book, when Saul is actually killed and they take his body and the body of his sons. They hang him up on the wall in Beth Shean. It's going to be a small contingent from Jabesh Gilead, probably in direct response to Saul's deliverance of the city. That Saul, for all the crazy stuff he does wrong, Jabesh Gilead honors him in death, and they're the only Hebrews to do it. Everybody else is going to let his body hang there, but it's going to be this city that returns the favor that Saul is about to do for him. So the narrative uses, I think, Jabesh Gilead as kind of the bookends for Saul. That even a guy who is as imperfect as Saul still has some honor floating around in his life. And when we look at all the background in Saul's life and what's going on with Jabesh Gilead and Gibeah and all of that, we begin to understand a little bit better why this guy might have some issues. So this city actually has no other mention in Scripture. It's these two places. And because of that, you want to hear the end of Judges. You want to hear everything up so far that's happened so far in Samuel really as one solid event, one narrative. And so it's not that Judges ends, we get Ruth and we get over to Samuel. It's all going from point A to point B. There's a trajectory for all of it. So here's your map of, oh, that's Israel, cool. So you've got Dead Sea, you got the Jordan River, Sea of Galilee. Maybe some of you have been to Israel or you've seen pictures. Jordan River looks like something you can jump across in places. It's just a little trickle of a stream. But back in the ancient world, there's no agricultural siphoning from Jordan and Israel, yanking massive amounts of water. It was a pretty good torrent back in the day. So it took a lot of work to cross it. And way up at the top, maybe if we zoom in, top of this slide, you'll actually see Jabesh Gilead. So most of the Hebrew settlement, remember they cross the Jordan River, they end up at Gilgal. That's kind of the spiritual staging ground that we've talked about. And from there, they're going to reach out and hit everything. They're going to hit Jericho, then they're going to hit Ai. And then eventually, in the book of Joshua, the Hebrews are going to settle in the hill country. They're going to settle up north. They're going to have a hard time with the Philistines. And then there's going to be lots of other people groups. But if you remember, there are a few tribes, Simeon, Manasseh, that say, hey, you know what? We really like the area over here. It's very, very unpopulated and very, very good grazing land. So we just want to settle over here. Moses says, okay, no problem. But you can just see from the map, there's just not as much stuff there. There's not as many cities. And again, archaeologists are pretty sure Jabesh Gilead right around there, but they have to get there in kind of a strange way. So Saul, his hometown, way down here in the little area of Benjamin, which is just this tiny little area here, because they were already a small tribe long before the book of Judges, one of the smallest tribes. Judges is going to make them nearly extinct. So Saul's operating out of Gibeah, and the action here is going down across the Jordan. So any battle that Saul has to lead, any troops he has to lead, requires rallying everybody from Israel and then trucking downhill about anywhere, depending on where they do it, but 1,000 feet downhill, crossing and then heading back up. So lots and lots of difficult terrain in that part of the country. So we're going to get a siege. Sieges are fun. You love them, don't you? Tom, you siege anybody lately, or? No. No, okay. I do that when anybody asks me, like, hey, you're walking in a park and they hand me their phone to take a picture, and I have two options. I can make a joke and just say siege, or I can run off with their phone. But law enforcement doesn't appreciate the latter option, so I just say siege. But in the ancient world, you don't want a long, protracted battle. Both sides lose stuff, and the stuff you're trying to conquer to begin with doesn't do you any good. If you slaughter everybody in a city, they can't pay you tribute or taxes down the road. Or if you were trying to occupy the city and you completely flatten it, that doesn't do you any good if you want to live there. And so a good way to approach a city, a fortification that you want to defeat, is to just blockade them. Make sure nothing gets in or out, and eventually starvation will get a hold of them. And we see this in lots of places, and maybe there's some stuff next. I don't know. Is there anything else on the notes on sieges? Yeah, I think so. Anyway, if you have inadequate military forces in late Bronze Age, early Iron Age, defensive fortifications are quite the thing to overcome. Now, we don't know about the defensive fortifications of Jabesh Gilead. They probably don't have 20-foot high walls that are 12 feet thick with 10-ton iron gates, but they probably had enough of a wall that it wasn't an easy city to breach. And the Ammonites probably don't have enough forces that they can go in easily and attack it. So they're just going to surround them, and they're just going to wait them out. But ultimately, it's pretty clear that they're going to win the day. As sieges go, lots of famous sieges out there. You can find them all over the place. And the only reason I throw this up there is to let you know that most sieges happen to major urban centers, areas where you've either got a military threat or you have an economic advantage for taking it. So whoever controls, obviously you can see the city of Tyre. Like, you don't want to, if you could go out in a time machine and live any place, I wouldn't pick Tyre. That's just they're always getting beat up as well. Jerusalem as a power center, as you know, is going to get attacked by the Assyrians. The Assyrians, though, aren't going to be able to take it. They're going to actually take Sennacherib, the Assyrian king, said he's actually takes more than 60 cities when he stomped through, but he wasn't able to get the city of Jerusalem. His own records say, yeah, I sieged the city of Jerusalem, shut Hezekiah up like a bird in a cage, but wink, wink, I couldn't get it. He doesn't come out and say that because it's a little bit humiliating. But later on, in 587, the city of Jerusalem is going to be completely destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. And then the Romans again are going to do it in AD 70, where they gave Nebuchadnezzar a run for his money in the pounding that they gave the city of Jerusalem. And then the Crusades again, it'll show up again. So you'll notice that in lots of cases, like Rome or Athens, there are major changes of empire connected to some of these sieges. And Harold talked, I guess, last Sunday about the capture of Babylon. Really wasn't a siege. The history Herodotus tells us is that Cyrus just diverts the Euphrates River out into the desert, and then they just march in under a gate and take it in a single night. Not quite a siege, but the idea is the same. If you remember your Hollywood movies and have ever been to the site Masada, where after the fall of Jerusalem under the Romans in AD 70, a handful of Jews, maybe 100 of them, went and hid out on Masada, which was one of Herod the Great's fortresses, and it was a mess. It took the Romans 2 years to capture it. And when they finally got in, all the Jews had killed themselves. So, and you can imagine being a Roman soldier. You know, hey, Joe, we spent 2 years for what? We got nothing. But this is how angry that the Romans were at them. And there was an idea of you don't want to lose face by letting anybody go unpunished. So, and then of course Constantinople, the great Christian-Muslim conflict when it becomes Istanbul. So anyway, lots of good sieges in history. We're probably overdue. Maybe we could go siege the Mormons or something. That would be fun. Picket line. Could be interesting. Anyway, when we're talking about this deal here toward the end of verse 2, it seems like a weird deal. You guys all remember Monty Hall, right? Yeah. I always like the Monty Hall problem that mathematicians get to work on. You know, the three doors. You remember that one, where you pick a door and he'll open one of them and show you a false prize. Like, you get the new car or the goat. He opens, and you pick one, and so he'll open the other door and give you, oh, that's the goat. And it's at that moment math tells you should always switch doors, because you have a higher percentage of chance of winning once he's shown you. And it's a weird thing in physicists and mathematicians always try to figure this stuff out. Why are we talking about that? And more coffee. Okay, that was a bad idea. We'll do it this way. What they are suggesting in the moment is going to be a brief treaty. And the treaty is just an agreement for how two people are going to interact, two groups are going to interact. And the ancient world really knew three kinds of treaties. One is what we call a suzerainty treaty. This is big dog, little dog, where the big dog shows up, the Great Dane, and the tiny little Chihuahua. And who gets to set the terms of interaction between the Great Dane and the Chihuahua? It ain't the Chihuahua. And the treaty that we read in the law in Exodus and Deuteronomy is a suzerainty treaty. God is the Great Dane. The Hebrews are the Chihuahua. It's not a negotiation. It's the bigger party, the more powerful party, showing up and saying, this is the way we are going to interact. And it's not a take it or leave it. They got the baseball bat in hand and say, these are the terms that we are going to get along with. Sometimes we see this with nations. We see this with Abraham and Abimelech, and where David and Jonathan were peers. We'll just make a covenant. So this can be, again, individuals, it can be nations, and that's a parity covenant, where equal parties sit down and say, what commitment can we have to just make sure our relationship is strong going forward? And this is the stuff of friendship, or it might be the stuff of business. You sell somebody an ox. This is where you walk in to buy a house or a car. You're on equal terms. The third category, though, is what we're looking at here. And this is a vassal or a submission treaty. And this is where the inferior party offers the terms. So this is what we do when we pray, right? If we try to manipulate God with a treaty like Jephthah does, he's the Chihuahua saying, God, hey, if you will come through on your end and use all your power because I got nothing, I'll give you something I think you value, which is my commitment, sacrifice my daughter, all that kind of stuff. But this is what the city of Jabesh Gilead is going to do. They don't have a leg to stand on. They've got an army, even though it's probably a small army, they're pretty small themselves, outside the gates. And what do they got? They'll just say, hey, we'll surrender to you and you can set the terms. And that sounds really good until they actually tell them what they want. Nahash has got the superior position and he knows it. So what he wants to do is mutilation, which seems like a weird kind of thing. But the text specifically says his goal is to humiliate the city of Jabesh Gilead. And again, in a communal setting, it's not just that city. By humiliating the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead, by gouging out their right eye, what does that say to all of the Hebrews? You got a Hebrew city, they're maimed. All of Israel, by extension, gets maimed as well. And so he wants to just humiliate the entire nation of Israel by just punishing this one small city. This is what he's after. There's a practical sense that probably plays a distant second as well. It's really hard to be an archer if you only have one eye, because how do you close to aim? I mean, how does that work? But having one eye alters your depth perception. It gives you a blind side when you fight, all sorts of stuff. And so by doing that, there's a sense in which it would limit the capacity for future retaliation. But that's really a distant second if we want to say that that's a part of this at all. So anybody interested in this kind of a deal? Seems like a good deal. So the elders of Jabesh said to him, here's their counteroffer. Give us 7 days so we can send messengers throughout Israel, and if no one comes to rescue us, we'll surrender to you. You notice anything weird about this? What seems wrong with this on the face of it? I think this was our discussion question for last time. I think I threw it in the notes. Yeah. Why would the Ammonites agree to that? I mean, that just seems weird. I mean, this is what the Nahash must look like, right? He's a starship operating on minimal thrusters, right? He's 53 cars short of a full deck, right? Not the brightest bulb in the chandelier. What do you want to go with? Why would he possibly do that? Well, I think as we dig into it a little bit, you can ask some questions. Maybe they just didn't have the forces to take the city easily, right? We haven't got enough guys, and so if we can get you to surrender, you'll minimize your bloodshed, we'll minimize ours. You know you're going to lose the fight eventually anyway. Do you want to go down swinging, or do you want to just give in? You lose an eye, but you don't lose your kids, right? You don't lose any of your loved ones. So maybe that's what's in view. It could also be from a place of overconfidence. And this is where we start to have I think a little fun or interest at least, thinking about the text and what we're looking at here and who this city actually is. If it's unsuccessful, so if they, in other words, the city sends out messengers and say, hey, can we get a deliverer? We've got some problems over here. And nobody shows up. And then they submit and attack the city. What basis is there for the Jews to retaliate? Like, they asked for help. They gave you a chance. You said nothing. And so is anybody going to show up and complain later, oh, you attacked our city? Well, in an honor shame culture, it'd say, well, you had the chance to deliver them and you did nothing. A little late to be complaining now that we mutilated your people. Deal with it. But more interesting, though, is it possible that both sides might expect no one to show up? Remember who Jabesh Gilead is. This is the traitor city that had been completely destroyed because they didn't show up for battle. How motivated are they to actually come and deliver this city? And it's not only that, they have slaughtered themselves. What do you do when, as a people group, you have something in your communal history that you'd rather not talk about or think about? And this is part of the problem in our culture, right? We've got some pretty dark marks in our own history as Americans. And it's very easy to say, pick your issue, right? I never owned a slave, so not really my problem. But it's really hard when my dad was doing some genealogy research and found one of our ancestors that owned one. So in a teeny tiny way, probably, I have been benefited by that. I'd rather not think about it. I'd rather not wrestle with, are there any moral implications for that? Do I have access to anything that somebody else doesn't have? It's easier to just leave the past behind and just say, hey, here's who we are now, and let's just all move forward together. And maybe the Hebrews have got some of that going on in their head. Maybe it's just a struggle that they don't want to mess with. But maybe this is the reason that this city is the target of the Ammonites to begin with. Maybe they know this as well. Maybe they know that Jabesh Gilead is kind of on the low list of cities. So I was talking to one of my kids, I forget who it was, and we came across the word, was it some crime that happened in some Oakwood somewhere? And I was joking around, and I said to my kid, never move to a city that has the word oak in it. Like everywhere I've lived, there's an Oakland, there's an Oak Park, and they're always high crime. And why is that? Well, and Shawnee chimed in very wisely, said it's because they name those subdivisions when the cities are new, and that's an older way of naming, sticking a tree in there, right? Elmwood, Elk Grove, that kind of thing. And when an area ages, it tends to increase in crime. So shorthand, don't live someplace that's oak. What kind of reputation does Jabesh Gilead have among the Israelites? Not high crime, but it's a disgraceful place to be. We might look at that and say it's something like maybe Detroit, someplace we just don't want to hang out. It used to be great, but there's just something over time that changed it and made it a less desirable place to be. So I'm wondering, and again, the scripture doesn't tell us, I don't want to push the text too far beyond what it actually says, but maybe there's some stuff under the flowing under the bridge here that affects some of these dynamics. Why they chose this city, why they asked for 7 days, but that 7 days is actually going to work very well for them. When the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul and reported these terms to the people, they all wept aloud. Then Saul, who was returning from the fields, behind his oxen, asked, "What's wrong with the people? Why are they weeping?" And they repeated it to him what the men of Jabesh had said. So it's interesting. Brand new king, what's he doing? He's working on the farm. You know you have a really nice, fun nation when the biggest, most important leader in the nation still works for a living. And you see this sometimes in small European countries and that kind of thing, where there's like 1 million people and the president of the country is not much more than a mayor. And so, they keep office hours and weird kind of stuff, and anybody can walk in and talk to him. Maybe that's what's going on here. Saul seems to be still working on the farm. He doesn't seem to be working on a palace. He doesn't seem to be sitting at the city gate doing king stuff. He's plowing behind his oxen, and he's actually working them. Is it his hesitancy, again, rearing its head, that he doesn't feel the need to step in and start acting like a king? It may just be that there's a lack of need. There doesn't seem to be any, until the Ammonites show up, there doesn't seem to be any immediate pressing need that he has to solve. But I think the situation on the ground is that this does show that Israel is pivoting from one form of government to the next. And it's going to take them some time to process everything that means. They know other kings have palaces and cabinets and wealth and taxes and administrative structure. Israel has none of that. They're going to have to develop all of it. And Saul, for his part, doesn't seem to be in a hurry to actually make that happen. So the monarchy isn't going to be implemented quickly, at least quickly in terms of a month or two. So the grief that they express, again, it's communal, and that's always a head nod to the way we ought to learn to do emotion together in a community. That can be repentance, that can be grief, and a lot of times in our individualized culture, we tend to carry those burdens by ourselves. But the Hebrews were good at doing life together, right down to their emotional reaction. And so they're grieving because they are struggling, I think, over the potential fate of what is about to happen to this city. So Saul asks, and they relate the story to him. So when Saul heard their words, the Spirit of God came upon him in power, and he burned with anger. He took a pair of oxen, which is convenient because he had them walking with him, cut them into pieces, and he sent the pieces by messengers throughout Israel, proclaiming, "This is what will be done to the oxen of anyone who does not follow Saul and Samuel." Then the terror of the Lord fell on the people, and they turned out as one man. When Saul mustered them at Bezek, the men of Israel numbered 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. I just want you to figure out what I'm doing with that picture, but this is why we like ChatGPT. Is I just said, grab Elvis and his 68 comeback special, and give him a big nose, an impossibly mammoth nose. And AI just never lets me down when I do that. It's just awesome. So the Pinocchio thing, we'll get there in half a slide here. But we seem to get a clear insight, again, of what the Spirit of God does for Israel's leaders. The term for power here really is about prosperity and success. If you look at the way the word is used in the Hebrew, it's about making things happen, and the results are in your favor. That's kind of the idea. So what the Spirit is doing is empowering Saul to succeed at what he's about to do. And interestingly, this righteous anger that comes on him as well. So the Spirit of God comes first, righteous anger second. And the reason we stuck Elvis on here with his proboscis, did you ever hear Ray Stevens' Ballad of Ned Nostril? No? Okay, you can go look that up on your own time. The actual Hebrew and the Greek kind of use the same term. In the Greek, it's like flaring nostrils or horse snort when a horse gets angry. In Hebrew, it's his nose burned. And you ever do that where you just get so mad you're just breathing fast through your nose and gritting your teeth? And it's a physical metaphor for your internal emotions. And so now you'll remember that forever. Burning, hunka burning nose. So Saul immediately is going to do some very, very shrewd leadership if you notice what he does. Wait, I don't even have this. Yeah, okay. Why might Saul be interested in rescuing the city of Jabesh Gilead? Because he's a Benjaminite. And all of a sudden, the pieces start falling into place. And maybe the reason the city even asked is their boy's been made king. Not only is it their boy, who's Saul's mama? We don't know. But it's the city's surviving women that became 2/3 of the mothers of Benjamin. And so, undoubtedly, Saul has connections to this city. It might not be his mom, it might not be his grandma, but it might be his cousin, it might be, a friend down the street. Everybody knows somebody who has their backgrounds in this horror story at the end of Judges. And so Saul, interestingly, is going to respond. And this is the same thing we see, I think, in good leaders very often, is they are shaped by their backgrounds. Like, the book of Ruth, right? Why is Boaz such a good guy? You ever wonder that? Like, he gets a foreign widow that shows up in his on his farm, just a poor woman working. She's not even Jewish, and he tells his workers, "Make sure you leave this woman alone." And he's impressed with her. And it's like, yeah, leave her some extra stuff, because he's impressed because she's caring for Naomi, who is a widow and poor. When Ruth shows up with basically kind of a salacious offer of marriage. She's making herself vulnerable for his exploitation when he's inebriated and on the threshing floor. And Boaz doesn't respond like Noah. He doesn't respond like Lot. He responds a lot more like Uriah, which is, it doesn't matter how drunk you get me, my character is still my character. I ain't going anywhere, even when he's plastered out of his mind. So Boaz, a little tipsy. Ruth says, "Here I am, and you can do whatever." Boaz doesn't exploit her in that moment. That instead, what he does is, even though she's a foreign widow that nobody would really care about, he steps forward and goes through all of the things necessary to make her an honorable bride. Why does he do that?
Because of his mother.
Because of his mother. And who's his mother? I only needed a name. I'll talk about the prostitution stuff. I can do that. Yeah. Rahab from Jericho is Boaz's mother. And once she becomes Hebrew, she marries into the clan. It's reasonable, I think, to assume that a woman who's forced into prostitution by circumstances and who's free from that might raise her son a little bit differently. And maybe Saul here, same thing. He's got a background of being partly produced by human trafficking. I remember one time lecturing on incest with Lot and his daughters. I just had a student in class just raise her hand and say, hypothetically, they're asking for a friend, what do you do if this is your background in your situation? I knew exactly what she was saying. Most of the class didn't, because they were sleeping like most people do in my classes. Tom's popping no-dos over here like nobody's business just to stay awake. He just fills his cup and just... But what does that do to your thinking about yourself and about relationships and all of that when you look at your background and it's not necessarily a product of love, that it's a product of practicality, possibly even abuse? Who does that make you? And Saul's going to have his flaws and his foibles, but I think right here there is something that many people do, which is we're gonna circle the wagons and we're gonna pursue loyalty. I think the reason that the city asked for 7 days is they knew Saul would come. He's one of us. And keep in mind as well, because the city had been completely destroyed, the women pulled out. Who's left in the city? Not a lot of people at all. So it's probably a very, very small population to begin with. So look what Saul is going to do. You notice that he takes his oxen, cuts them up, right? Puts them in a FedEx box and ships them out through Israel. This has got to be great, right? You go to the mail one morning, FedEx driver's there, he drops off your package. You're like, oh, great, Grandma sent me something. You open it up and you got a foreleg of an ox in there. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Saw a video where like some guys, like they'll take a long leg of an animal, and that's how they fish for piranha. You just dip it in the water and pull it up, and then you got all these piranha over there, and you just hold a bucket under them and shake them off, and there you go. So I guess if you got piranha in the Jordan River, you could probably do that, but look what he's doing. Why does he do that particular action? He's tapping in to the societal consciousness about this Levite's concubine, who the Levite does the exact same thing to. Where does he learn it? It's part of the tribal lore. It's how everything started. Body parts were used to start a war by this Levite. And Saul is saying, yeah, you remember the last time this happened? Let me do it again. Except this time, he's not going to use the shock of finding human body parts in your morning mail. He's going to do it with a threat. He's going to say, anybody who doesn't show up with this battle, I'm coming after you. We've got a king now. There's a new sheriff in town, and if you don't want your cattle destroyed, then you better show up for the fight. And so this is exactly what everybody's going to do. And then this is the phrase, the terror of the Lord fell on the people, and they turned out as one man. And this one man thing, that is a complete unity that is going to go forward and do the task. 300,000 from Israel, Judah alone 30,000. And this is about the way the numbers always seem to work. Judah outnumbers most of the tribes, which is why they are such big players in Scripture. But basically, whatever you do with the numbers, it's going to be big numbers for a small job. You don't have a lot of Ammonites. You don't have a lot of people in Jabesh Gilead. Israel is ready for overkill. And so Saul is actually going to make this happen. So they told the messengers who had come, say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, by the time the sun is hot tomorrow, you'll be delivered. So when the messengers went and reported this to the men of Jabesh, go figure, they were elated. They said to the Ammonites, hey, tomorrow we'll surrender to you and you can do whatever seems good to you. Give us another day. We want to play Xbox, with double vision for one more night, and we'll come out tomorrow. Then you can gouge out our eye. So it's this promise of Jabesh Gilead because they've given them a timetable. Saul's messengers let them know that there is timing, that by the time the sun's hot, midday, it's all going to be over. So they know what's coming. And so that is going to help give birth to this whole ruse that they've got planned. So when the Ammonites, assuming that they're expecting the people of Jabesh Gilead to surrender, yeah, you can party a little bit. Your soldiers can get a little bit inebriated. The threat of imminent battle is going to be over. So they're not looking for any troops to show up. And if they do, they'll pay attention. They'll pay attention in the morning. But overnight, yeah, they're not too worried about it. And again, as I suggested, I think there's probably already little expectation of deliverance. But they may not know the background and all the under the hood stuff about Jabesh Gilead. So I think this ruse is going to be effective because it plays to the expectations that the Ammonites have. They're just caught completely off guard. So The next day, Saul separated his men into 3 divisions during the last watch of the night, and they broke into the camp of the Ammonites, and they slaughtered them until the heat of the day. Those who survived were scattered, so that no 2 of them were left together. And here that last phrase in opposition to Israel comes out as one man. Who do they leave? Not a single man together. So where the Hebrews were perfectly united, the Ammonite army ends up completely disintegrated as a result of this. So the attack is going to happen in the last watch of the night, so that's the last 4 hours, basically 2 a.m. to sunrise. It's the time where the cats are at their worst, and they come in and meow and climb on my head, and yeah, it's the time where you actually sleep very, very heavily, and nobody is expecting this. So it's a difficult, particularly given the terrain, it's a difficult time to attack, but it's very, very effective if you can pull it off. And this is going to be Gideon. He does the same kind of thing, middle of the night kind of thing. And Saul receives the credit for the battle strategy. God, in this case, doesn't give it to him. He gives it to Gideon one time. He gives it to Joshua another time. Saul seems to come up with this on his own, that there is just something, again, because of the Spirit of the Lord giving him success. Ultimately, it's attributed, I think, to God, but it's Saul who actually divides everybody up and does their thing. So again, there's no opportunity in the middle of the night. You're not looking for a night battle most times in the ancient world. And as a result, there's no opportunity for the Ammonites to mount much of a counterattack. And so this disintegration thing where everybody is scattering their own direction, this is a kind of an idiom, a way of saying that it is complete, utter victory over the enemy. And it's going to be this group that is going to regularly oppose Israel during Saul's reign. So the big bad guys of Saul's reign, these are one of them. Philistines as well, and they're going to fade into the background a lot under the reign of David, both groups. So the people said to Samuel, you remember way back from last chapter? Who was it who asked, shall Saul reign over us? Hey, we got it. Bring those men out to us, and we'll put them to death. Yeah. So Saul, now that he's proved himself, those guys, we're gonna let them live before. Saul kept silent, if you remember, didn't say anything. And here's Saul's response. This time he speaks up in regard to his detractors. He says, no one shall be put to death today, for this day the Lord has rescued Israel. So, at least on the front of his reign, he seems to have it together in terms of what's going on. All of a sudden, he commands massively populist appeal. He's the bomb because of what he just pulled off. So everybody celebrates him. And the detractors from the last chapter, it's the ultimate cancel culture, right? Somebody you disagree with politically, and if you disagree with the leaders, your goal is to silence them. Maybe some implications for us to hear as well. I've read that I think it's upwards of 40% of Gen Z believes that violence is an appropriate solution to political disagreement. And we've seen this with United Healthcare CEOs. We saw it with a Democratic legislator in Minnesota and her husband and her dog. We saw it with the Kirk assassination. This is not a political left-wing or right-wing thing at all. There is something in the psyche of our culture right now that says violence is an appropriate way to deal with your political enemies. And it's on both sides of the political aisle. And the most wicked thing we can do is look the other way when it happens to the other side and bemoan it when it happens to ours, whichever side you're on. It's horrible, vicious, vile, evil when either side does it. And Saul, I think at his best, says, it's not going to happen on my watch. That if God determines leadership and he determines politics, as Romans 13 says, no authority exists except which God put there. That in a way, every leader is God's anointed. Well, they're not my president. Well, you can do that if you want. Well, it's not my dictator or not my Nazi or not my guy with dementia or whatever you want to say. Maybe Saul here, I think, close to being at his best, says, I'm not gonna play that game. So at the beginning of his reign, it's good. And this is the core of what a true leader is. A good leader doesn't worry about his detractors. He doesn't. It's the cowardly, it's the fearful, it's the weak that need to silence the detractors. So what Saul does is he attributes his success to God instead, and that removes the need to maintain his leadership by being popular. So I can be popular if I just cancel everybody who doesn't agree with me. Saul doesn't do that, at least here. Later on he will. But he is going to do the complete opposite in the future. He's actually going to kill priests because they threaten his position and his reign. Wow, we can actually make it. We can make it through a whole chapter in a day. Yes, you did miss the rapture. Why did you ask? Samuel said to the people, come, let us go to Gilgal, and there reaffirm the kingship. So the people went to Gilgal. All the people went to Gilgal and confirmed Saul as king in the presence of the Lord. There they sacrificed fellowship offerings before the Lord, and Saul and all the Israelites held a great celebration. So the kingship finally made official. I think Saul gets the idea that he's supposed to be king. I think the people get the idea that he's supposed to be king. So he's been anointed as God's representative. He's been selected and affirmed in a public ceremony and with miracles. He's reaffirmed at this religious ceremony at their headquarters at Gilgal. And so this comes as hot on the heels of a military victory, and celebration ultimately is the result. And then Samuel's about to pour cold water on all of it. What's a preacher for if not to bring down the temperature in the room? Yeah. So next time, everything is going really, really well for Israel. Samuel's going to step forward. Read chapter 12 to find out what's next. And Samuel is going to confront the people and say, you guys blew it by asking for a king. Really? You're going to bring that up now? Think through what that speech is about, what Samuel's saying and why he says it at this point. God's provided the king, and yet they're kind of unhappy with it. But all right, let's get out of here. Let me pray for you, and we'll get on with our week. Father, we glorify you for giving us insights into our own culture, into what a good leader needs to be. We pray that we would not seek the populism that the world's just idolizes. We pray that we would bow the knee only to you, and that we would see your hand, your power, and your authority in all who rule in any capacity. Help us to obey, to submit, to pray for leaders with whom we disagree, and help us to celebrate where you act in any capacity through any leader, that ultimately we might lead quiet lives and bring people to you, that no one would have anything to say against us. We ask these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
No, sir, I'm sorry, sir.